Welcome to another deep dive. You guys sent in this YouTube video, Trafficking in America, Kia Vawar's story. And I gotta say, it stuck with me. It's really powerful, and I was hoping maybe we could unpack it together, see what we can unearth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really hits different when you hear about human trafficking from someone who's actually lived it.
Yeah.
All those statistics, they come alive in a whole new way.
Yeah, no doubt. Even just looking at Kia's childhood, it was rough. I mean, domestic violence, her dad struggling after Vietnam, always moving.
Yeah.
It makes you think, how much did all that instability actually play a role in what happened later?
That's a big question. I mean, it's not a direct cause and effect, obviously, but all that early trauma, it can really change how the brain develops, especially when it comes to things like, figuring out danger or forming attachments to people.
So someone who's always felt unsafe, never had that stable ground, they might actually be more likely to fall for someone who seems to offer that, even if it's all fake.
Right. It's like their survival instincts are screaming, find safety any way you can. And unfortunately, that can make them vulnerable to being manipulated. Kia running away at 16, meeting that guy on the plane who seemed so caring. It's tragic how it fits that pattern.
Yeah, it's easy to judge, to think, how could she not see what was going on? But when you understand the power of those early experiences, it's less about blaming her and more about getting how someone's past shapes their present. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And traffickers. They're experts at exploiting those vulnerabilities. They know exactly what to say, what to promise. And for Kia, it was that whole music industry thing, the dream of a better life, that really drew her in.
Yeah, the music videos, the excitement, it all seems so glamorous, but then bam, that brutal initiation into the gang scene. Talk about a nightmare, huh?
It really shows how easily those dreams can be twisted. And once someone's trapped in that cycle of exploitation, it's so hard to break free. Traffickers don't just use threats and violence. Sometimes they'll throw in these little moments of kindness, almost like rewards. It keeps the victim off balance, confused.
It's like they create this trauma bond, right?
Yeah.
The victim ends up relying on the abuser for any little bit of good feeling.
Exactly. It's messed up, but it's how they maintain control. And for Kia, it just got darker from there. She was passed around from one handler to another, and eventually she ended up stripping. I think she was trying to find some sense of agency, some control in a world where she felt she had none.
That part of her story, man, it's tough to listen to. But it shows how insidious trafficking really is. It's not always some sudden violent event. Sometimes it's this slow, horrible process that just eats away at a person.
It's dehumanizing. The trauma just keeps coming, and it can wear down a person's sense of self-worth to the point where they don't believe they deserve better. They can't even imagine escaping.
But even then, Kia says there was always this tiny part of her that still held on to hope. Like deep down, she always believed someone would come and rescue her.
It's incredible, isn't it? That tiny spark of hope refusing to go out. It shows you how resilient we are as humans. That desire to survive, to claw our way out of the darkness, it's powerful. And for Kia, her turning point came in the most unexpected way, a complete breakdown.
Yeah, she ends up in the hospital in a city she doesn't even know. But that's what ends up reconnecting her with her brother. And his love, man. That became her lifeline.
Talk about the power of human connection, huh? Even after all that trauma, all that isolation, that bond with her brother was what started her healing process. It makes you realize how important support systems are for people trying to recover from something like this.
And it makes you think, how many other survivors are out there, desperate for that kind of connection, that lifeline, but sometimes it's so hard to find or even to ask for.
No question. And then there's the stigma, the shame that comes with trafficking. It makes it even harder for survivors to speak up, to share their story and get the help they desperately need.
Yeah.
Kia, she goes on to build a life that looks normal from the outside, gets married, has kids, gets involved in her community. But it's only years later, through therapy and finally opening up about her past, that the real healing begins.
And that makes me wonder, are we doing enough as a society to create spaces where people can be vulnerable, where they can talk about the hard stuff without being judged? Because if we want to really fight trafficking, it can't just be about rescuing people. It has to be about creating a world where they can heal, where they can reclaim their lives.
It's a huge question. And Kia's story forces us to ask it. And that's where things get really interesting. I mean, Kia's story becomes bigger than just her. She becomes this incredible advocate, not just for other survivors, but like for raising awareness about trafficking overall.
It's like she took all that pain, all that awful stuff, and turned it into this spotlight, shining it on a problem most people would rather just ignore.
Yeah, and it's a really good example of what they call post-traumatic growth, where a person uses their trauma to, fuel positive change.
Yep.
And one of the most important things she does is challenge those stereotypes we have about trafficking.
Like the idea that it only happens in certain places or to certain types of people.
Exactly. Kia makes it clear.
Yeah.
This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's everywhere, every corner of the world, and it preys on people's vulnerabilities wherever it can find them. It doesn't matter your age, your race, how much money you've got, doesn't care.
She even brings up the Epstein case to show how, even with all that wealth and power, those guys were still involved in trafficking, and the victims could be from any background.
It's scary, right?
Yeah.
It shows we can't just sit back and think, oh, this doesn't happen here. Kia has this line that always gets me. She says, type in human trafficking and the name of your city, no matter how small or how big, and you'll find it. It's chilling stuff, but it's true.
And it makes you wonder how much is going on that we don't even see, because it's not always as obvious as we think, right? Chains and locked doors.
Nope, not at all. Traffickers are good at blending in, seeming totally normal. They could be running a regular business, using social media to trick people, taking advantage of loopholes in the law. It's a problem that keeps changing, which makes it that much harder to fight.
And the internet, like Kia talked about, it's a tool for traffickers, but it's also a way for victims to find each other, get support. It's kind of a double-edged sword.
Oh, sure. And it just highlights how important it is to be smart online.
Yeah.
We got to educate ourselves, educate our kids about the dangers out there, the ways people can be groomed and manipulated online. It's subtle. Prevention really does start with awareness.
What really struck me about how Kia talks about all this is how she focuses on education. It's not about blaming people or just dwelling on how awful it is. It's about giving people the tools to recognize the signs, to understand the tactics, and to speak up if they see something that doesn't seem right.
Exactly. It's about shifting the focus from just rescuing victims to giving people the knowledge and the resources to stop trafficking before it even starts.
And she doesn't shy away from how complicated it all is. She even talks about how the pandemic actually made online trafficking worse because everyone was so isolated. And she's not afraid to talk about the demand side of things, like how holding the buyers accountable is just as important as going after the traffickers.
At a big picture view,
Yeah.
recognizing that this is a problem that's woven into our society, and it needs a response that attacks it from all angles. And Kia, her own journey is like a perfect example of that. She goes from being a victim to a survivor to someone who's thriving, and then to this beacon of hope for other people.
It's inspiring. There's no other word for it. She could have stayed silent, let the trauma be her whole story, but instead she did something incredible with it.
It really shows you the power we have as humans to not just survive, but to rise above, to use what we've been through to make things better for others.
Her story is a reminder that even when things are really, really dark, there's always the possibility for light, for healing, for real, lasting change. And it's up to all of us to carry that torch, to keep shining a light on this issue and to keep fighting for a world where stories like Kia's are the exception, not the norm.
Couldn't say it better myself. Her story makes us think, but it also makes us want to do something. It's a call to action, each and every one of us.
So you've heard Kia's story. You've taken this deep dive into the world of human trafficking. What are you walking away with? What thoughts, what questions are you left with?
There's a lot to think about, no doubt. But for me, it all comes back to the power of stories. Kia being so open, sharing her pain and her strength that can spark real change.
It's a reminder that we all have a story, right? And those stories have power. They can teach us things, inspire us, create empathy, and ultimately they can help us build a world that's more just and more compassionate.
It makes you think, though, doesn't it? What stories aren't we hearing? Whose voices are being silenced? Who are we overlooking? And how can we create spaces where those stories can be told without fear, where those voices can be heard?
It's like Kia says, we all have a role to play, and maybe for some of us that role is just to listen, just to learn more, to be more aware of how real this is, how it's happening all around us.
Yeah, even that is powerful. When we open our eyes, when we try to see the world with more empathy, it changes us. It changes how we treat other people. It changes our choices.
And for some people, it might mean more than that. Maybe it's supporting an organization that's doing the work, or fighting for stronger laws, or even just having tough conversations with family and friends about this stuff.
Every little bit helps.
Right.
It all adds up to pushing for change.
Yeah.
And I think what Kia shows us is that even these small acts of bravery, small acts of kindness can have a huge impact. It's like just that one moment with her brother, that one decision to reach out for help. That's what led to her freedom. That's what started her healing.
Right. It reminds you that we're not alone in this fight. There are so many people out there, organizations, communities, working so hard to stop trafficking, to help survivors, to make the world a safer place. And we can be part of that. We can use our voices, our time, our money, even just our hearts to make a difference.
And it starts with seeing each other as people. I mean, that's what traffickers do, right? They take away your humanity. They turn you into something to be bought and sold. But when we recognize each other's humanity, when we treat each other with respect and kindness, it makes it so much harder to ignore this stuff.
You know, we've talked a lot about Kia's story and about how complicated trafficking is and about all the things in our society that make this problem worse. But the thing that sticks with me the most is hope.
Yeah, because even with all the darkness, her story is really a story of hope. Hope for healing, hope for change, hope that one day this won't even be an issue anymore.
And that hope isn't just some naive dream. It comes from seeing how strong people are, how when we work together, we can really change things. It's about believing that a better world is actually possible.
And it comes from survivors like Kia, who share their stories, not just to show us the problem, but to push us to be part of the solution.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I feel really thankful for Kia's courage, for her willingness to show us something that a lot of people would rather pretend doesn't exist.
And I hope this wasn't just like an information download for you. I hope it sparked something, a desire to learn more, to do more, to be part of the movement to end this for good.
Because knowing is important, but it's doing something that really makes a difference. And I believe that together we can make that difference.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and never lose hope.
And until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and always keep it in the box.